Hello, welcome everyone to our third webinar in a series from Port Technology International. My name is Stephanie Morley, and I'm the Director of Webinars and Conferences here at PTI. I'll be introducing the speakers for today's webinar on end-to-end supply chain, the real value of port digitization, where we will take a look at what is needed to make the port an enabler of digital innovation, end-to-end supply chain collaboration, and also ask the question of what is the value of port digitization? Today we are joined by SOCAR Terminal in Turkey, Israel Ports Company, the Port of Rotterdam, and the World Economic Forum Network. Now before we begin, a few housekeeping items to mention. We will run all of the presentations and then go to the live Q&A session after the third presentation is complete, with the aim to conclude at 3 p.m. British Summer Time. We are excited to make this as interactive as possible, so please ask your questions as we go along. On the right of your screen, you will see a questions tab, and this is where you are able to submit them. Please ensure that you direct your questions to any particular person. Lastly, this webinar will be made available for you and your colleagues to listen on demand from tomorrow onward, so feel free to share the link to those that may be interested. Now to our fantastic speakers. Right now, we will be hearing from Robert Hambleton, Managing Director of SOCAR Terminal, as he provides insight into how leaders are focusing their attention on how all the major stakeholders should communicate and coordinate as the industry continues to absorb the ever rapidly advancing technologies.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Robert Hambleton, Managing Director of SOCAR Terminal, located 60 kilometers north of Izmir in Turkey. In the next 10 minutes or so, I will attempt to summarize my thoughts and appreciation of leadership in the changing world of supply chain digitization. Forgive me that this will only be an introduction, given the limited time available. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is the most adaptable to change. Charles Darwin, born 1809. A man with great wisdom and vision. Little did he know that these words would be the first slide of a supply chain presentation in the 21st century. A true statement indeed. So this is what it's all about, moving away from the traditional linear supply chain and changing the way we communicate, integrate and collaborate into what many now call the supply chain ecosystem. It is certainly easy to argue that this system is significantly more complicated than the linear model. This next slide shows that there is a link between the context of trade in the left-hand column and the complexity of the issues for leaders, particularly during this period of change. Starting with the World Trade Organization, the basis for trade for many countries. It may not be perfect, but it is a reasonable starting point. With the bilateral and multilateral trade agreements, many would say that trade is improved. It is inevitable that new legal and regulatory frameworks must be in place as new technologies and processes come into existence. The rise of nationalism across the globe could have an effect on trade flows. This needs to be considered with great thought. The Trade Facilitation Agreement took years to put together, and in 2017, when it was signed, there was a great leap forward, improving transparency, expediting the movement, release, and clearance of cargo, eliminating some of the red tape surrounding customs. That said, customs inefficiencies still exist in many parts of the world. Supply chain stakeholders and governments must address these. Are the rich getting richer? Are the poor getting poorer? The wealth of the top 10% of the world's population used to equal the other 90%. Now the ratio is 1% equals 99%. How does the distribution of wealth affect the supply chain? We need to know the answer to this question. When talking about global sustainability, I think of the inclusiveness of all countries. Supply chains need to consider all nations, wherever they are located around the world. Let's move to the complexity for the leaders on the right-hand side of the slide. If digitization and digitalization are not disruptions to the supply chain industry, I don't know what are. Some would say that we are now moving through the fourth industrial revolution. After steam, electricity, and computers, that would seem to be a fairly complex set of circumstances for leaders to grasp and make the most of. Sharing data across industries, that's a tough call across companies, let alone industries. Partnering with other industries, this is a huge task in anybody's books. Ask any global business if they think that cybersecurity is becoming more of a threat. There is a resounding yes to the answer. As for the Internet of Things, this is a massive subject on its own. Leaders must be aware of the impact that this movement has and will have on the supply chain. Blockchain, a Herculean, ambitious attempt to improve economic, legal, and political systems. Leaders must be up to speed with blockchain, just in case it becomes the norm. The terminology of big data has been around for some time. Technology is now allowing this immense amount of information to be not only stored, but more importantly, organized and arranged in a logical way so that it can be used to add value to the organizations. Smart logistics, smart ships may be words of vagueness, but don't be fooled. Smart means getting the most out of all the technology available, and there's a lot of it out there. I sometimes think that transparency and visibility is a double-edged sword. You want to be able to see what you want to see, but do you want people to see what they want to see? That is when the control of competitive advantages comes into the debate. It is perhaps inevitable that behaviors of not only individuals but also whole organizations may change when external forces, like we see with the technological changes, are brought to bear. The creation of new processes must happen throughout this kind of major change. This requires considerable effort, time, and knowledge. And as if the above was not enough to be going on with, there's a pandemic flying around, seemingly at random with devastating effects. Does the COVID-19 herald a step back for the human race, or does it offer fantastic opportunities to make the world a better place in the future? So, surprise, surprise, it is the leaders that have to lead this change from the linear to the ecosystem. What are the aims of all this? Greater transparency and greater control means a more proactive approach to business. This improves planning with the consequence of greater efficiencies and flexibilities. When there is less waste, costs are reduced with quicker deliveries and improved predictabilities. And it goes without saying that there must be an overall decent return on investment and increased values. This next slide summarizes the leadership styles on the left-hand side that I believe could be deployed with success, along with the focus areas for the leaders on the right-hand side, more in terms of action. There is no new stuff in this slide, but I hope it highlights to all of us in leadership positions the main important factors. Looking at the possible styles for leadership first, if you don't get the buy-in from people, it won't work. How best to get the buy-in? You can use a collaborative approach to leadership. This can be very effective. Making a decision at the right time is often as important as the decision itself. Be decisive at the right time. No one person can achieve these kind of changes all on their own. Having the right team around you, will give you a much greater chance of success. Visible leadership. Some people call it leadership by example. You must be seen by those whom you are leading. It's as simple as that. The technicians and analytical members of the organization often grind out the details. Listen to them hard. They may find the devil himself. When you think you know the answer at the start of solving a problem, pause, wait, think, and turn a switch in your head which highlights the words, "I do not know the answer to this problem." This forces your mind to be more open and inquisitive to other people's ideas. They may be right, and you may be wrong. You may think you have a lot of experience. This may be true. However, some experience can be obsolete, while some of it vitally important. Equally, someone with little experience of the industry may come up with a great new idea that cuts waste more than you can ever imagine. The leadership style of coaching can bring the best out of all of us. Cultural differences must be taken into account when introducing new ideas, particularly across different countries, when training for a particular way forward, and when executing plans. Use the diverse nature of cultures as a gift to progress. Being a leader often requires decisions to be made that are unpopular. If they need to be taken, take them at the right time, whilst at the same time be aware of the need for emotional intelligence. This can be a tricky balancing act, but remember, on most occasions, you must consider both. And so moving to the right-hand side of the slide, where we should look at the areas of focus for the leaders under these conditions of change. Plan your communications. Plan your communications. Plan your communications. Yes, 3 times. Everyone must understand the need to change. Everyone must understand the benefits of change. Every leader must understand how to make the change and overcome the inevitable human nature of resistance to change. Of course, you must execute the plan. If the plan is good, execution has the best chance of success. If the plan is bad, simple. The execution and result will be bad. If a leader has low energy levels, not only will she underperform, but also those under their responsibility will underperform. As leaders, we must cultivate ways to ensure that our own energy levels remain high, even when things look bleak and impossible. Time spent in effective recruitment will often be time well spent, especially when recruiting for a position with greater responsibilities. When unions hear of automation, digitalization, cut waste, cut costs, they can quickly become very defensive and the resistance to change. This is one of the reasons why the communication plans have to be of the highest quality to ensure you also have the union's buy-in. Training at every level is of super importance under these circumstances, often the training for the very top of the organization, to ensure that the senior management are fully confident of the new technology and fully motivated to plan and execute. Similar to buy-in, bring everyone on board with you. There could be a small number whose resistance to change cannot be broken. These individuals must not be allowed to contaminate the rest of the organization. We are witnessing and experiencing an unprecedented scale of change, and therefore we need to ensure that within each step of the way, targets are achievable. We must monitor the results carefully and adjust the plans wherever appropriate. In the adjustments, we can be flexible, but at the same time maintain the same direction. I say expect the unexpected because so much of us, all of this is new to everyone. Do not be afraid if something goes wrong. It will. Success will be measured how you deal with the setback, not the setback itself. Along the way, encourage feedback, including feedback for yourself as the leader. Personal reflection is often an effective way to improve yourself. So that concludes my introduction summary of leadership in this changing world of supply chain digitization. Thank you all very much for listening.
Many thanks, Robert, for that wonderful presentation. We are now up to our second pre-recorded presentation, which will be presented by Gadi Benmoshe, the CIO for Israel Ports Company. And he'll be discussing port digitization in the age of COVID-19 and their working collaboration with IPSA. Gadi, please join the stage.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here to talk with you about the real value of port digitization. My name is Gadi Benmoshe. I'm the CIO of Israel Ports Company. In Israel, we have 4 cargo ports, and we are now building 2 new container terminals that will be operational by 2021. Israel Ports Company responsibility in one sentence is to make a better maritime supply chain. And the importance of that is that 99% of the Israeli import and export is by sea. So what we do is real estate management and maintenance of Israel seaports assets and the development of Israel seaports infrastructure, the physical one and the digital one. The digital infrastructure is the IPCS, Israel Ports Community System. The majority of the processes in the Israel maritime community are digital through IPCS advanced services. We have about 1,500 companies and 6 million messages per month. Our stakeholders are from the government and business, customs, Ministry of Health, Israel Railways, and importers, exporters, ship agents, forwarders, custom agents, and so on and so forth. The important thing in digitalization of ports, it's having the round table of all the stakeholders, getting the solutions together and the mutual understanding for getting forward those digital solutions. But it's not enough to have a round table, a national one, because we are talking about international trade. So for that reason, we are part of IPCSA, the International Ports Community System Association, that has 46 members operating in 50 countries, handling the exchange of information for over 250 sea and airports. Half of the world maritime cargo is transported through those ports. One thing that we do in IPCSA is the international standards that are very important, working closely with International Maritime Organization, World Customs Organization, and so on. And also doing international practical initiatives to enable seamless and efficient trade logistic processes. If you ask me what is the real value of port digitization, it's the difference between a long queue of trucks waiting at the port to few trucks hauled at the port gate. It's the difference between a lot of vessels waiting outside the port to no vessels waiting outside the port and every vessel being served. COVID-19 taught us a number of lessons. The impacts were, in one hand, the help of port digitization for handling the COVID-19 pandemic situation was a minimal influence to ports that have a substantial implementation of digital processes in the maritime community. And now that we are looking at what it helped, now digitalization of supply chain processes and PCSs as its enablers are considered even more critical by a wider range of stakeholders. There is less resistance to change to new methods of working, and all the projects and initiatives involving digitalization are now highest priorities and receive support from even government bodies. Part of the lessons, or the important ones, as I see it, is that the collaboration for a better supply chain visibility is needed. and also that it is difficult to instantly digitalize a process during the crisis. During the crisis, everybody is busy handling the crisis, not making something digital. So it's important now to plan how to digitalize all the processes that are still paper-based. Those two lessons we at IPCSA are addressing now. One of them is by the Network of Trusted Networks, and the other one is by the IPCSA Blockchain Bill of Lading initiative that we at Israel Pod Company are leading. The Bill of Lading today, it's still a physical document, most of the cases. And there is a pain point to the community for business risk of loss, forgery, delay in delivery of physical document, and commercial disputes. And also there is a high handling time and cost to issue it, to deliver it, to validate it, compare, and so on. So what we did is we transform the physical process to a blockchain solution. From the issue of the ship agent to the exporter and all the players. And the important thing that blockchain allows is that from the moment that the ship agent has issued the bill of lading, it is visible for all of the players. We implemented all the business rules using the smart contract, and knowing that there are users, late adopters, that won't be able from day one to use the blockchain solutions, we developed web applications that the users can interact with the blockchain solution through this web application. Combining the data existing today in pod community systems, there is a better visibility for all of the players. Not only that they can see who is the holder of the bill of lading at a given time, you can also see the logistic pipeline and see where is the container using the data that we have in the pod community systems. But for having international exchange of data, the second initiative that IPCSA is promoting is the Network of Trusted Networks. This solution facilitates a neutral, global, scalable, and collaborative solution among pod community systems. With that, we can share and exchange port-to-port and cross-border data. The first service that will be running through this network of trusted networks is the track and trace, but also the IPCSA Blockchain Bill of Lading initiative will be integrated into Network of Trusted Networks during 2020. So, end-to-end supply chain digitization, it's, to my opinion, the right way to a seamless and efficient port. And it's important to all of the community to promote it and to push it to receive a better solution and more efficient. And as I said before, also to help us handling crises like the COVID-19. So thank you for your attention, and please contact me if you have any further questions. Thank you.
Many thanks for that, Gadi. Very insightful. Now, I would like to introduce our next presenter, Martijn Thijsen, who works within digital strategy, transformation, and new business at the Port of Rotterdam, where he will discuss port forward, smart and connected ports and supply chains. Leaving it up to you now, Martijn.
Good afternoon, everybody in Europe, evening in Asia, and morning in the US. I'm very happy to share a few thoughts on how we in the Port of Rotterdam approach end-to-end visibility and supply chain facilitation. I hope Alice can help me come up with the slides. But to put it a bit in perspective, I think ports have been there for the last centuries, basically providing infrastructure. Thank you, Alex. Infrastructure, hard infrastructure, that is. So that's what we've been excelling in Rotterdam. We have been leading an infrastructure where the world is changing, and even with COVID-19 now, even more rapidly than ever, maybe. So we as a port also have to think of how can we provide the infrastructure of the future, not only key walls and safe passage, but also digital infrastructure that we use to facilitate trade, right? Because in that sense, our role will be the same. We facilitate trade. Traditionally, if you wish, we'll do that with hard infrastructure, but more and more so with digital or soft infrastructure. So our aim is to really become the smartest port, where we can connect everybody involved with global trade. Now that's quite a bold statement. Everybody who's involved with global trade, because it's, as was already explained by my earlier colleagues, it's becoming more and more of a network. But it is about connecting the networks. But that means for us that we are also in a position where we are going to provide digital services as an infrastructure. That's completely new. We need to do that with other ports, because if we do that only in our own port, it doesn't make sense, and supply chain is global. So it's changing our role from a landlord model where we just lease out land and collect port dues to a real port manager, but without interfering in the market, But we need to think of what business model is that for us for the future, not only our own business model, but I think for a lot of companies involved in global trade, business models are under pressure because of disruption, of digital disruption, or even more the pandemic issues we have now. So it's a very interesting time where you need to open your mind and be open to everything. We have a bit of a model for that. I think this is not new to anybody. We have a physical layer, that's the Port of Rotterdam itself. On top of that, you can build a data layer. So basically you have data on everything that happens in the port and further out. Then you apply a layer of infrastructure, technology, being it blockchain, being it 5G, being it AI, being it what have you. That's where data turns into valuable assets. And on top of that, of course, it's how can you share it then with the community, and how can everybody benefit? How can we mutually expand the pie? We're doing that with a sort of 4-step approach, which we all take simultaneously. But the world started with no automation at all. So first, you need to also start with your own automation or digitization for the Port Authority itself. It goes from really easy part where we now all work remotely from home with MS Teams to eliminating paper within the office. But even well, we're already building it, but here's also part of a digital twin, for example, where you can really go into your own automation and your own digitalization of your own company. The next part where we are working on is everything that's close to us. So that's the Port of Rotterdam, the industrial complex, where we have a port community system, same as was just discussed by our Israeli colleagues, where we eliminate waste for the port community. So that's really where we have one integrated, interoperable system in the port community. Of course, once you've got that in place, and in Rotterdam we started it in the 80s already, you need to reach out to hinterland, your core catchment area of your port. So where are the goods coming from? Where are they going to? And how do you then integrate them into your integrated platform, interoperable platform? We have solutions in place there where we can actually track containers from the port community system, a database, add with data points that we get from supply chain players, add with data points that we have ourselves, where you can start tracking containers into the hinterland. That's just an example. The ultimate is, I believe, or we believe, is sort of a global connected ports system where there will be a network of connected ports that facilitate trade, that are interoperable. And if they all bring their own integrated system in the port community and their own hinterland system, you can get to an end-to-end supply chain coverage. Supply chain is then interesting because you have the physical flow of goods, but you also have the paperwork around it and even the trade financing part. So I'm going to give you two examples on sort of what it will never be an end state, but what hopefully a near future state will bring, where we have a smart and connected ports network that facilitates supply chains. And we have now two parts sort of live in live environments using blockchain technology. I thought it was interesting to share them here, just as to show what we are trying to achieve and what we will be capable of in the future. And it's not only us, it's the others as well, if you wish. One is Deliver, and the other is a part on an interoperable EBL solution, which is very interesting to see that from the IPSCA, the Port Association community, they are also working on EBL solutions. So that's where we need to match up with interoperability. Let me start with Deliver. Start with a co-creation with ABN AMRO Bank, which is a large trade financier in the Netherlands, and Samsung SDS, which is the logistics service provider of the Samsung conglomerate, whereby we found each other basically on different topics, but we figured, hey, one of us is active in trade financing, but we need data points in the supply chain to actually base our risk analysis on. The other one, the service provider, was shipping goods from Korea to the Netherlands and vice versa, but they needed visibility on their goods and they needed financing. And we as Port, we want an efficient supply chain via Rotterdam. So the more we know what's coming, where it's going, and related with trade financing, if we can lower the risk, then everybody can benefit. So we set out sort of looking at the entire supply chain of a global trade, where you not only have the physical flow, but also the financial flow that goes in return, and where there's a lot and lots of documents involved. Basically, we already trade in a similar way since the Middle Ages, if you wish. I think a bill of lading is already dating from those times. So there to be done something about that. So how can we change that? And then we figured we need a sort of universal adapter in the middle, that no matter what you put in, what data you put in, out come some things everybody can understand and everybody can, of course, then use for its own purposes. Blockchain here is the enabler, because that enables you to sort of make it traceable. Where it's coming from, it's immutable. And in that sense, that's very interesting, because you can then, without storing any data, always backtrack if something is on its way, where it's been loaded, what's on there. And that's then, of course, very interesting for global supply chain trade finance solutions. So what you see there is that it's sort of a notary platform that has a set of standards and it only transfers validated data from one party to another. They are all a node in the blockchain network, and the only thing the notary does, is transfer validated data from one place to another. Of course, that's not so valuable in itself. It is with what you do with that data. So on top of that, there will need to be a sort of an app store or an environment where people can pick and choose on applications that make use of the underlying data. And I think that shows also where you can see the role of a port in this sense, in this conglomerate of three great companies in trade facilitation. So the only thing Deliver is doing is really providing the means to an end, distributing validated data and opening a platform for global trade to happen. This is now live, so containers are flowing from Korea to Rotterdam and back. And we're looking to expanding this with partners. It starts with, of course, track and tracing, but also trade financing is now done via the platform. So it's I think a great example of what technology can do for end-to-end supply chain visibility and in the end even trade financing. The other part, and otherwise I will run out of time, I think is already mentioned, the bills of lading, the most elusive of documents in global trade, but somehow we are not managing to really change that into a digital efficient way. Yes, there are digital EBL solutions, if you wish, which is basically a bill of lading, but then digitized. the true value is that we need to have a set of standards, rules, and legal agreements, standards basically, that you can also transfer the title of ownership of a bill of lading, because that's the catch-22. That's legally not allowed in a lot of countries, and because of that you have all this paperwork. So we found with Singapore a great ally. They also rely on global trade, as does the Netherlands. So together with Singapore authority, the Dutch authorities are involved, the government, and our own block lab at Port of Rotterdam, we've set out to sort of set trade facilitation by design, where we use MLETR standards and blockchain technology, put one and one together, and make sure that you can immutable then transfer the title of ownership. This is not something that we can do our own, so we need the parties involved with that. So we are of course discussing with DCSAs, the carriers, the shippers, the banks on what they need in an EBL functionality. The only thing we then do as Port, or together with Singapore as ports, is figure out a way of standards that this can globally be adapted as the legal framework based upon trade can happen. So it's not an EBL solution that we leave to the market. Again, we as Port focus on trade facilitation and then let the market do its job. So that's, I think, another example of where we are experimenting. This, by the way, of course, technically is not so difficult. As I showed, it's about the legal part that will involve quite some time. But the proof of concept has been done, and we are now moving this into the next phase, where we go, hopefully by the end of the year, give or take the current economic situation, to get some first live shipments in a sandbox environment where we can actually digitally transfer the title of ownership, provided that we have a legal sandbox from two governments that we can work in. Just as an example, I think that underpins, at least that was my aim, where ports are sort of a natural facilitators of trade. And if we start with ourselves as a port, then connect the community around us with our neutral role, with our role of trade facilitation, connect that to the hinterland. And if we all bring that together as ports, we can really connect the dots of the end-to-end supply chain. So for example, I have the Rotterdam network, I have the hinterland, Israel has theirs. If we then can connect Israel and to Izmir, we already have 3 or 4 ports that have their own port community and the hinterlands connected. The key is in having it interoperable, so systems will be able to talk to each other and have a legal framework where we can then also do actual trade. And also in that, I think ports have a role to play, at least we as Port of Rotterdam, we do in the Dutch ecosystem. That was it for me. There's a lot more I can share about it. I can talk about this for days, but reach out to me and I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Great. Many thanks for that, Martijn. That was an excellent presentation. Now I'd like to invite our Q&A moderator, Wolfgang Lehmacher, to the stage. As many of you will know, Wolfgang is a World Economic Forum expert working with the World Economic Forum Network in many capacities, mainly the supply chain. Wolfgang, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Stephanie, and great presentations from all the three, putting different angles on the topic, which is the digitization of end-to-end supply chains. And we have also questions from the audience, and in fact, the first question was my question, and I'm therefore very happy to pick this up, because we are, to a certain extent, entering uncharted territory, and definitions are important, at least for the discussion. Whether for implementation, I'm not so sure, but to ease the communication in a global network, it's good that we know what we are talking about. And there are 2 things which we are dealing with, which is end-to-end supply chain and which is digitization. And I would like from everyone to have your very brief definition, what that means for you, what means, and I get a flavor from your presentation, but what means end-to-end supply chain and what means digitization. And the question, in fact, more precisely, which we got from the audience, is what is the difference between digitization and digitalization? If there is any, right?
Well, just Google and you can read for hours.
Yeah, but I would keep the same order and start with Robert. A quick take. What is digitization and what is the other thing, and what means end-to-end to a port?
Yeah, I first of all, I better do a test on the voice. Is it working? Yes. Okay. So I think the difference between digitization and digitalization, the first one, digitization, is basically putting information into digital format that is then able to move from A to B, which is the digitalization. It's the digitalization is the movement of information, and the digitization is the bit that you've got to do first before the information moves smoothly, takes the waste out, and reduces the cost and gets the stuff from A to B more quickly.
Thank you, Robert. Gadi, what's your take?
The first sentence is that it doesn't matter. But as my colleague Michael Bergman mentioned here, they did a great article, and I think that it's good to look at that. But you know, the thing is that looking at the whole supply chain, and I think my colleagues here talked about that. This is the importance, because looking only at the port or at the terminal, it doesn't solve the efficiency of all the supply chain. And we, as a government-owned company, looking about all the trade, it's important to us to look at all of the parties. Sometimes the port is the one that delivers the most benefit from some digitalization, and sometimes the transport company, sometimes the warehouses. But it's important to look at about the interests of all of the players for the better good of the efficiency.
Thank you, Gadi. Martijn, what is your take on it?
Well, I think I agree with my two panelists here. I mean, you have, of course, the technical discussion of digitization versus digitalization, and I think you pointed out very clear on the technical part, digitalization, how you move from A to B. Then to supply chain or end to end, that's where it becomes interesting, right? Because if we all digitize ourselves with our own standards and our own processes, then how can we, well, moving it is, you can even say sending a PDF is digitalization, but how can you then even make it interoperable and make sure that it talks to each other and understand each other? And then you have supply chains. Well, we can have an hour discussion on what is a supply chain. Is it then physical? Is it the global trade system? Is it how does that work? In the end, it doesn't really matter. It's about that we are moving to a place where we all have our own systems and using those systems, what works for us, and make sure that the other part of the world understands it and can use it for their own benefit. And that in the end will be then end to end, if you wish, or even go up into global supply chain finance. But it starts to me with standardization in that sense that we all need to sort of start to talk the same language, right? And even in the real world, we have different languages, and still we manage to do trade with countries where we can understand them. So we will find a way if there's not 100% standardization of a certain data format or data input, because that will never be achieved, or it can possibly be achieved, but we are a sport involved in some data standard working groups, and they take ages. And we have to do that, right, to understand what the issue is, but at the same time, we have to move.
Yeah, no, I would like to build on this, because I heard from yourself and from Gadi, in fact, the idea of network. And I'm dealing with supply chain for quite some time in my life, and the term has always a bit of disturbance. Is it a chain or what is it? And today, for me, it's really a concept. And you can call it chain, but it's a concept. You can call it network, it's a concept. You can call it system, and you hear all that, right? And it's something what you have described as it's the flow of goods, it's the flow of information, it's the trading of services, right? You at the port become also a node in a global trade network of services, and you find new opportunities there, right? And it's a system of financial flows and what is attached to that in services. And I would like to combine that idea with what Robert was talking about, which is leadership. So we talk about this network, and we all know that unfortunately in life nothing falls into place automatically. So we talk about standards, we talk about global network. So how can that happen? Who is driving that? Who is taking the leadership? And as Robert spoke about it, first, what is your take on leadership in the global system, supply chain network, whatever you wish to call it, port network?
To me, the leadership is all about understanding what you're trying to do, and then combining the people that you have around with you with the best technology that you have around with you, combining those two things to support what you are trying to do. So the new technologies this is no different from any other technology advance, except that it's more complicated. So you can use the technology to enable you to do what you want to do more effectively, i.e. move goods from A to B. Whether that's cheaper, whether that's faster, whether that's for the government, whether that's for an individual business, you use the technology. And as Martijn said, I think the standardization needs to be very well understood by the leaders so that they can make the smart decisions.
Okay, Martijn, you spoke about your relationship with Singapore. Very quickly, how do you want to take that to the next level? You have hundreds of ports in the world. Do you want to do bilateral deals with all of them, or how do you want to move that forward?
Yes and no. No, so this is leadership as a company, I think, or as a port, or as leading ports, if you wish. And it's a thin line between reaching out to everybody. I mean, you can go on your own, and some people will follow, right? And the better leader you are, the more people will follow. But in the same time, if you're a good leader, you provide a platform for others to excel. So that's also, I think, how I look at leadership, not personally, but as a company, is where we do this in sort of coalitions of the willing, and try to find examples and use cases of what collaboration or network of networks, or how we want to call it, what it can bring. And from that sense, that to me is leadership. And if we find like-minded people in like-minded companies, so it's a combination of company and people that would agree, and we can build some use cases, we can bring to the world what's actually out there, what's the gain, and then it will scale. Because it's the same with energy transition here. Everybody sees the benefits, nobody wants to pay for it. And people have been making their money in this industry in transparency for ages. So are they all of a sudden willing to give that up? No. But can this all be done for free? No. So we need to lead, I think, as ports, we are the neutral facilitators in a supply chain. I mean, as Port of Rotterdam, at least, we are not a part of a supply chain. So we are in a position where we can lead, and the rest can follow. But we need to do that on a case-by-case basis at first, find coalitions of the willing, and expand that.
Yeah, Martijn, now I wanted to ask Gadi, but he left, at least visually. But because you both mentioned the EBL, the electronic bill of lading.
Yep.
And for me, this is a icebreaker in the whole thing, because it goes end to end.
Yeah.
So, question to the both of you. Hope Gadi can hear us. And Gadi, are you still there? Martijn, how far is that EBL away from us? Will we get more tailwind now, and do we see that in a year or two in reality?
Hopefully. Now it's a difficult part, right? there have been multiple tries at this topic. I think COVID-19 will accelerate this because we basically see imports, goods cannot be released because the paper bill of lading is not there because border restrictions, I don't know whatsoever, people not being able to physically stamp the document because they're working from home, can be done in the next 2 weeks, goods can be released. So yes, this sort of underlines the need of the issue. There are already electronic bill of lading solutions, right? That's more sort of a digitized bill of lading than digitalized because it's moved from A to B. The key thing is how can you, and if you want to go to your end-to-end supply chain part, Wolfgang, how can we make this title transfer legally binding digitally? And that's a legal discussion that we need. We can use the UNICITRAL MLETR standards for that, so it's sort of accepted, but then it needs to be adopted country by country and put into their own legislations that it's accepted. That will take time. Some countries are much more ahead than others. So you will see that, for example, Singapore is far ahead. Netherlands is now working on it. There's probably more examples. There will be countries that will not be so advanced, so there will need to be a paper substract. So it's going to be a hybrid, but it's something where we need to involve governments because they need to legalize it. And I think that with a Singapore and a Netherlands now focusing purely on that. So we are not in the business of providing an EBL solution. We are purely in the business of getting the title transfer done because that can be a deal breaker.
Okay, Gadi, we're on the EBL.
Yeah.
How far is it away? 1 year, 2 years, 6 months?
Okay, so the solutions of the ABL, also digitalization. Martin talked about that the port community system in Rotterdam, it's from the 80s, okay, and still today, 40 years, and not everything is digitalized. So
no, far from that.
Yeah, so I'm sorry not to say that it will take time, but we must, and we are doing it, start and be persistent. And that's the way, talking about the leadership. And I think we are hosted by PTI, talk about technology, but I think that technology is not the important thing. It's the ecosystem leadership. And that's the important thing, and that what will help us to introduce and to keep on being in advanced digitalization. So,
okay, Gadi.
Yeah.
But can I add Wolfgang last part? Sorry. I'm very happy with the IPCS part on bill of lading on the digital part. I'm very happy with DCSA as sort of the speaking voice of the carriers now picking it up, because then we get traction, then we get the ball rolling. That will put pressure on the governments, and that's where we can discuss interoperability. So to me, we are not competing with any of these initiatives. We're trying to put them together, and not everybody's having a piece of the puzzle, and we should discuss that. And if we have double pieces, then decide what's the best one and throw the other one away, right? But it's great that things are now working and everybody's having their own insight, and if we can combine them, then it's really, really powerful. But the fact that now the market is picking this up, and we as ports can help in facilitating that and bringing the governments along and the parties along, as from our neutral background, I think we are in a perfect position to drive that.
Super. There is a question from the audience. Can the port be the bridge builder through technology? And I put it in the context of the global network. So, and Martijn, you're indicating a bit like that you are driving it through business cases. But Gadi, you brought the round table idea, the region, the local, the global round table, which I find fantastic. And Robert, you were also on stakeholder management. And Robert, maybe your view from a leadership point or perspective. Can the port be the bridge builder?
Indeed, I think it can, and I think it's one of the best places to be the start of the bridge building. There's no difference in concept, I think, between what we're talking about here and the standard port community system. You're just enlarging your net, your web, around the port community system. And talking about governments, I think this is a really important stakeholder, because unless it's going to be good for the country, you're not going to get the Minister of Finance saying to the head of customs, right, go ahead. And so when talking with the governments, the whole technological thing has to be A, relatively simple to understand, and B, it's got to be good for that country. So the explanation, the communication to the government has to be very clear, not complicated, otherwise they will, quite frankly, get confused and they'll find it much more difficult to make a decision.
Perfect. We are coming to the closing moments, and I would like to put a very tough question out to all the three of you. And this has already been posed indirectly by Martijn, who said people don't want to pay for that. But I'm not happy with that answer. I'm not happy with data and digitization is a cost of business in the 21st century. There has to be money involved. So the question is, where could that money be? So how to monetize digitization? It could be monetization of data. It could be monetization of solutions, of platforms, of tools, of analytics. I think there is a lot of room to create value. And I would like to have a quick round from everybody, and Martijn, starting with you. Where do you see the value? What is your pitch to the community, whether local, regional, global?
Very challenging issue, this, because you can go on in a small scale applications with business cases and make them profitable, but in the end that will not solve the issue that we are discussing. The issue is so big that it's too daunting to pick up that bill. To me it really comes with find use cases in co-creation with the partners you know and trust and that are willing to invest a little bit. Then connect these dots, connect these parties, these ecosystems, and then agree that you are in the business of expanding the pie, and then later decide who gets which part. So don't start off with designing a solution, defending your own piece of the pie, but be open. And yes, you need to invest something, but it's also not fair to look to the government or to a port or to a commercial party. No, we all should invest a little bit, exchange how it works. Once we find something that works, make sure it connects with the other part of the world, and then discuss the bigger picture. Okay, guys, we are making cost. We all benefit. How do we divide this? And thank you, Martijn. To that, yes, yet.
Yeah. Gadi, your take. How do you make money for Israel?
Okay, making money is also being more efficient. Okay, and each of the players being more efficient in its processes, it saves to them money, and this is the side that I look, not earning more money, but having more efficient and less expenses, and that's how you get back what you invest in digitalization. That's my view.
Robert?
Very quickly, I think it's a step-by-step process, so you grow out from the port. Don't take huge chunks out at a time. This is going to take a long time, so you do it step by step, making money more efficiently, close to your own operation, and moving towards the end goal.
Thank you so much. Now, great conversation. I think we could go on for hours. I hand over back to Stephanie. Thanks to all of you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, everyone. And I would like to thank all of our participants for participating, all of the questions, as well as our presenters. So many thanks, gentlemen, for your time and the information shared. And to Wolfgang for moderating this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
My pleasure.
Great.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye, Martijn. Bye, Gadi. Bye, Robert. Thank you very much. And I just would like to highlight to everyone that our next webinar on port automation and digitalization through LTE 5G private wireless connectivity will take place in 2 weeks' time on Wednesday, June 10th at 3 p.m. British Summer Time in collaboration with Nokia. So please register for that, join us, and we look forward to seeing you there. Be well and keep safe. Thank you very much.